everyone, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I am very excited today to talk about developer relations with some amazing friends I have. We have Tierney Cyren, who is part of NodeSource. He does developer relations for NodeSource. We have Tara Manicsic, who is a progress developer advocate for KendoUI, also a Google developer expert, and Simona Cotin, who is a developer advocate at Microsoft. And my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. I'm a Google developer expert as well and co-founder of This Dot. So, wow, I love you all. I know we just saw each other at NG Atlanta, and now we see each other again. It's such a weird coincidence, huh? But, I just wanted to go quickly around the room and just, if you guys can just talk about like what you all as developer relations people actually do, because I know each role is a little bit different. So maybe we can start off with Simona.
Hey, super happy to be here. So I work as a cloud developer advocate for Microsoft, where basically my focus is to make sure that the JavaScript community, or JavaScript, is a first-class citizen on Azure or in the cloud. And part of my role, I do travel to a lot of conferences, but I also contribute with a lot of feedback to the product teams, where basically we're talking about how does the community feel on Azure, which is the direction in which certain products should go. And yeah, we have those kind of conversations.
That's awesome. What about you, Tara?
So I think it helps if I say how I actually got into Devreaux, because I didn't know that it existed. And I was working on node engineering before, but I was doing a lot of community work. So I started up, I founded and directed the Cincinnati Women Who Code and the Cincinnati Node School, and was doing all the stuff in the community to do run free workshops and such. And I ran into my now coworkers, Brian Rinaldi and Jen Looper, who were like, "You realize this is a job, right? Like, people do this for a living." And I was like, "What?" And so it was basically, trying to get communication between the engineering teams and the people using the product. So the people making the product and the people using it, and also the marketing team. So kind of to sum up what I do is I love going to conferences. This is where I see all of these three amazing people, is at conferences. And but it's also, I get to meet everybody in the community face to face, which is kind of rare these days. And I work remotely, so I'm alone in my office all the time. But also, I just started a new video series for getting people introduced to KendoUI and React, and then also doing a Kendo Bento series, which is everything around Kendo, including Vue and React and Angular. And then I hate writing blog posts, but they asked me to do it, so I try to make more tutorials because I like tutorials. So it's basically, if you really like coding and helping build something, and you really, really let people and other developers and communities, this is the dream job.
That's so cool. Super honest. I don't like writing blog posts. Yeah, I love it. And then what about you, Tierney? You love writing blog posts, right? It's your favorite?
Yeah, it's my favorite. So I do a lot of blog posts. I think last year I did 118. And then, over the last year, I've done everything from helping manage events to speaking a lot, to doing other things that are kind of behind the scenes in terms of Devrel. A lot of the stuff is kind of user facing or community facing, but then there's also a lot of kind of behind the scenes stuff, doing things, helping the product, seeing things in the community where there's a lack of tooling available, and going and kind of sharing that with the product. Another space I go help in is the Node.js community committee. So a lot of the work I do is go and contribute back to the community and help grow the community itself. And then from there, go and kind of anything that helps the Node.js project really helps NodeSource, because we're kind of focused on Node. So that's a lot of what I do, is going and helping the Node community, and then kind of bringing a lot of that help back to NodeSource.
Yeah. So quick question, Simona and Tara. So is KendoUI and Azure open source? Are either of them open source?
So KendoUI has open source aspects. There's a Kendo core side that's mostly the jQuery library. So there are components that are available open source. Otherwise, it's licensed. And when you do a license with KendoUI, you get access to jQuery, React, Angular, and Vue libraries all in one.
Yeah, so Azure is a huge product, and just like KendoUI, there's aspects of Azure that are open source. Like, for example, Azure functions, they're completely open source. You can just run serverless in your own company, whatever. But there's other aspects that are not open source too, and the documentation is all on GitHub too.
Yeah, so I'm actually really curious, because Tierney, I know you spend a lot of time, just because Node is an open source project and you're so directly related to it. You spend a lot of time probably on GitHub, and just managing that community. But what's that like? And also, Simona and Tara, same thing. Like, do y'all do that as part of your developer relations roles?
So, spending a lot of time on GitHub, it's actually a balance. I very much have to take time to go help manage people on GitHub. Much to my surprise, managing or being co-chair of the community committee is more of a managerial role than it is a get things done role. I really do have to go and help people get their things done, rather than me going and getting things done. So that's the majority of what I do on GitHub at this point, and I do spend a lot of time there, and so I definitely have to make sure I balance that appropriately with the other work I have to do.
So I would say, because I don't our product isn't open source fully, so we don't have a lot of management as closing issues and going crazy on GitHub, although the engineering team does that with their issue trackers. But when I write blog posts, especially tutorials, I tend to write them all with a repo attached to, so every time I change code, there's a commit, so you can see what I actually changed, and then I post all of that in the README as well. I wonder if my team knows that I do that. But so on the repo, I have a repo for every tutorial that I do, because I think GitHub is a really great resource, especially for everybody going through code and trying to lead people through code, because you have this advantage of a resource that's look, this is specifically what they changed. Because that was always my really hard time in tutorials, it was and then you changed this code, and it's what file was that in? What just happened? But if you have a commit that's all specifically showing what's in red, what's in green, it was just a really handy tool that I was happy to have at my disposal. So that's how I'm on GitHub.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty much what Tara mentioned there. Most of the demos that I'm building, well, actually all of the demos that I'm building are on GitHub. I'm not as good with writing READMEs. That's one of the things that I need to improve. And just like Tara, I hate writing blog. Well, hate is a strong word. I'm not a huge fan of writing blog posts, but that again is on my list to improve. And Burke Holland, who I guess all of you know, he's kind of shared this God knowledge where he was you have to produce something on a weekly basis, no matter how good it is. It's something that will help you keep going. So yeah, my demos are on GitHub, and then we as a team, the developer advocacy team, have a sandbox where we keep our demos, and there's a really fun demo there with the Cognitive Services API from Azure, and you can take pictures of your food and understand whether you have bacon on your plate or not. And there's a few others, yeah. But we do spend time on GitHub, even for making changes to the Azure documentation as well, like even for the product.
So can you be non-technical and be a developer relations person? Like, do you guys know people that do that, or?
I'd say yes. I'm probably out of the 4 people here, I'm probably the least skilled developer. I'll be totally upfront and honest about that. I don't think you necessarily need to be a highly trained developer or have a ton of experience there.
But then how on earth do you write these blog posts?
So I write the blog posts, and I kind of actually use them as a way to learn myself. So I often don't have the knowledge already. I use them as a way to say, okay, I want to go learn this. I'm going to create a blog post as I'm learning it. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I've kind of gained from this. And I've actually always seen developer relations as a path to get to that, is having a more comprehensive knowledge of development. That's how I started, is in the Node.js community, starting as contributing to the website. I could do HTML and JavaScript on the front end. It's not as easy to do Node on the back end. So that's how I kind of started, and I kind of moved into developer evangelism from that. But it's still, I think it'll be a lifelong path of still always kind of growing into more engineering skill.
Well, so it's kind of intriguing because, so I heard a few things that actually, when I look at developer relations in general, I don't really see, at least it's not very visible to the public, that you communicate to product teams, right, and marketing teams. And so I think for a lot of people out there, when you see developer relations, you're more thinking of it as, okay, these people are trying to get numbers up in terms of adoption. And I'm just curious, like, are you guys judged on the adoption rate of, like, how actually do you even measure that as a developer relations person? And then also, a second question is, what percentage of it is actually talking to product teams and things like that? And is that more of the reason why they have developer relations people and your salary's justified?
I actually, before we move on though, I do want to touch on one thing that Tierney said about like how technical you have to be, because just real quick, I think the biggest thing you have to be is a quick learner. Both on like technology side and like all the lingo that goes around along with it, all the communities, and learning what people need. So it's like people and learning, like connecting and learning, I think are some of the biggest things of the Devrel role. Because I mean, I would have never known so much about atomics and shared array buffer if I didn't write a paper on it. And I think that that just really helps, like being a good learner helps you convey to other people how to learn something. And I think that is one of the biggest parts of this job. But on to your question, I think I may be an oddball out of the 3 of us here because I'm a little more closely related to marketing. So like I have a call, like 1 to 2 calls with marketing every week. And which is kind of funny because I'm a business school dropout. So I thought I could go to marketing school and it would be like math and people. And that's not exactly what it is. Turned out CS was much more fitting for me. But as far as like with the numbers, we get reports all the time of, what people are picking up as far as when they're trying our demos and looking at our blog posts. But I think it hinders the creativity of a Devrel to be like, hey, you haven't hit this certain quota, especially when a big part of being a part of Devrel is getting the community excited and helping the community out. That isn't the easiest thing to measure, though. So I feel like they've explained this to me multiple times about how they're evaluating me. And I'm just like, cool, can I go to another conference now?
So I would like to jump in on that and say I am actually I directly report to marketing. I'm very closely tied to marketing. So another one of the things I do is I go and help build our, digital downloads, our ebooks and stuff. And actually, a lot of those are taken from the blog posts that I write. Our ultimate guide to NPM. That's 4 or 5 blog posts that I wrote, all condensed into one kind of digital asset. There's a lot of that. A lot of what I do is also going and helping. When there's a need for content for an email or something like that. So I am also very closely tied to marketing, and that's one way I contribute, and that's a way that I can kind of be measured. But a lot of it is Devrel is very intangible. Especially with community work, it's very difficult to measure that. So I don't really have an answer to actual metrics on how I measured, because actually I don't think I even know. I don't think anyone knows.
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions that I hear the most, and one of the questions that I hear even more, the answer, I have no idea. In our case, it's definitely so we're in the engineering organization, and we do synchronize with the marketing team. Recently, we've kind of decided that we have some themes. Like, for example, this month we're talking about serverless. So actually, marketing is focused on serverless, and if we can help with this theme, it's absolutely fantastic. But we also have a very close relationship with the product team. So we meet with them on a weekly basis, or depending on what's happening. Like for example, because I'm really passionate about serverless, we whenever they're releasing new things, like we have the code extensions, right, for functions, and before they're releasing all the products, they're like, do you want to have a look at this extension? Could you please provide feedback? Is it doing what it's meant to do? Is it easy to use? Do you think your community would feel empowered to use this extension? And yeah, so we have a strong relationship with the product team. And then in terms of how we're measured, yeah, that's tough.
I will say, in defense of all of us, though, that you do see a lot more companies. I mean, Microsoft made a huge push with this amazing new Devrel team that they have, because it is important to remember that all software is being made for people. And that is like your people connection to your community. And we're kind of like, the white matter in your brain, the community and the product team and the marketing team. And there's the disconnect that can happen between product and user, or, that helps to have somebody come out and explain it to you in a way that makes it easier for you to do your job and to make your apps and to make things that you want to make. So it's, in a sense, like, although it's hard for us to really quantitate the impact we're making, in a sense, it's pretty indispensable as well. Job security. No, I'm just kidding.
That's actually so interesting, right? Because it's you sort of look at, I was actually hoping for an answer that would be very, like, this is how you're quantified and measured, and this is how we have conference metrics, blah, 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 things like that.
Wait, Simona, what was your quote that Awesome said on Twitter the other day, where it was like, some things, I can't remember what it was, but it was like a perfect quote for the situation.
I think it was, some things make sense and some things just need to be done, or something. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, I think that it's kind of like some people, it's this whole idea. I mean, I remember when social media first came out, right? And everybody's like, oh, Twitter metrics, like this is how we're going to quantify this, and this is how this is. And I think developer relations is kind of like that, where, you know, whoever is part of the organization or is running the organization, if they buy into it, they just sort of need to trust the people, and then hopefully they hire the right people and good people who know what they're doing enough to where it's going to make an impact on the organization, but it's still sort of a soft thing, right? Or
Yes.
Go ahead.
So you actually bring up a good point. Like as part of our team, we do focus a lot on social media, and we do use Twitter metrics like engagements and maybe kind of views on articles that we've written or people on the team have written. Not necessarily me always, but we do use that kind of metric. And there's also things like you can add query parameters to URLs, and then you can track how many people have viewed that. And for example, the documentation on Microsoft has a really good tracking system that has nothing to do with our job, but we can look into that. So for example, you can see how many people have started getting started article, and then you can see where they stopped. So at which step, and then based on that, we can iterate and improve the documentation page or improve the demo, or understand where people, and actually understand where people are struggling, and make sure that we are improving that both from a documentation perspective, but also from a product perspective. Because obviously you ask yourself, like, does this mean that I'm building the right thing? Maybe people are not feeling comfortable using this in a certain way.
I'm probably not giving enough credit to my demand gen and marketing team at all, because we do. So I do get charts and graphs every week of like the new adoption of our product and the new trials, and corresponding information about, you know, what blog posts are, you know, getting the highest looks, the most amount of time, what links are getting clicked inside of them. So there's a ton of software that helps you see what is engaging the users, what they're interested in, and let alone all the research that I know that they put into SEO to see what we should be writing about, to see what people are interested in, because that's the whole point, is giving people what they want. But basically, I think that there is a ton, like there's that whole other side of it, of being this software that is able to understand where we're getting our drop-offs and where people are getting interested. And like Simona's right, there's a ton of information out there. So I should give credit where credit is due to my demand gen and marketing team.
And I should probably do the same. You know, I personally go and do a lot of the metric stuff myself. I go and grab Twitter metrics for basically everything. I go and create the UTMs. I go and, you know, I create social posts for other people at the company to, you know, help go and drive more engagement. And then I also go do a bunch of things like, you know, submitting to different social sites like Hacker News, Reddit, you know, Echo.js, which I'm very glad is still alive. You know, doing that kind of different kind of outreach and engagement stuff is really important, and it is actually a measurable boost to people engaging with you and your product and your company. So
yeah, so so that's great to hear. I mean, that's kind of like, in order to, well, I mean, it sounds like, Tierney, you're kind of like, okay, well, you don't have, you know, the level of maybe, you know, the marketing team that, you know, Simona and Tara have, but you're like, all right, well, I have, you know, you just sort of know you need to do it. You know, you need to provide measurable metrics. So you do it yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it is just experimentation. Like, for the last year, marketing was myself and one other person, and me doing, the community committee stuff and the events. That was a significant drain on my time that I could help with that stuff. But this is a way I can go and contribute to that, and help, have some measurement. And a lot of it, like I said, is experimentation, going and trying different things, going and seeing, which sites actually help you, which sites don't, what ways you could get more engagement. That's a lot of what that kind of stuff, that work was for me.
So I like going to conferences, and it sounds like, though, a lot of the stuff that's being measured on specifically is not related to conferences. So
actually, so that's one of our biggest ways to get in contact with people. So we a lot of times Progress, and that's KendoUI and NativeScript, specifically are like the sides that I'm on, have booths at conferences. So we always, and so that's where you can get like the awesome swag, like the socks and the hats and the t-shirts. But also that's our way that people can come up to us and say, there's this thing happening with KendoUI, or can I do this with KendoUI? And ask you all of these questions up front, like right there in person, so you can give them immediate answers, even sometimes walk through their projects with them and walk through our demos with them. So conferences are actually one of the best, funnest, but also one of the best ways to actually like get in contact with your users and with people who are using your products or want to use your products or have any kind of questions. And also, like, for the marketing team, they're able to get in contact with the person if they stop by and say, like, can we send you some information? So they get leads out of that. And it's great because usually people who are at conferences, they're there to learn a technology and they're there to adopt new technologies. So conferences are the best.
I think that another aspect with conferences, at least for our team, is that traditionally Azure has been .NET or focused, or has communicated with the .NET focused audience. And in our team right now, basically we are going where the developers are. And this means that part of our role at conferences is also raising awareness about the product itself. So, and it's not necessarily super measurable, although you could obviously see how, if the traffic has increased, like the visits to the docs page, or some trials have been created, but mostly just being there with the community, where the community is, because that's what conferences are about, right? Many people come to conferences to learn, but they're also to learn from the talks, but they also come there to meet like-minded people and just have conversations about how they're building stuff. So just being there and saying, hey, Azure can actually help you do this is very powerful and is valuable for our team.
Yeah, I love that. I actually, when I talk to people right now and I talk to marketing teams about developer relations, or sorry, not developer relations, but having a conference booth, right? They're always like, okay, actually, Tierney, you and I actually had a great conversation about this at NG Atlanta. Like, is it worth it? Is it worth it to have a booth? Should you have a booth? Like, whatever, like, isn't it more effective to go talk to people? I've always felt like it was more effective to just go randomly talk to people. And we've never done the booth thing. But after talking to Tierney, or actually after talking to you guys right now, I'm like, okay, well, actually marketing shouldn't think about booths as just lead generation, but they should also think of it as sort of like an open customer service booth in a sense, right? Like getting product feedback. So maybe it's not worth it and you don't get as much sales generation out of it, but teams in general should not be thinking about it that way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like kind of intangible values. Lead gen is the #1 tangible value out of a booth, but then you get to hear people's pains around your, whatever technology you're working in. In my case, it's Node.js. So we get to hear, what's what are the difficulties in monitoring Node? What are the difficulties in securing your dependencies? We get to hear that and kind of use that as product feedback, and also kind of address people's pains and realize, oh, this is something we hadn't considered. And then there's also the fact of, it's more of a, okay, so if I'm on the floor, I can go and talk to you about it, but it's a little bit unnatural. Whereas if someone approaches a booth, it might be, okay, like I'm willing to engage with this and actually, specifically talk about, your company or what you do or your products. So I think that's a very good way to look at it, Tracy.
So everybody seems to love, like, whenever I mean, I'm sure you guys get this in the community, right? Like, oh my God, you're a developer relations person. This is so cool, right? And I mean, I feel that way too. Like, wouldn't everybody just love to just do what they love, which is go talk at conferences and write blog posts, and it's the most amazing thing ever. But what are some of the truths? Like, how is Devrel hard, or is it just amazing and you just love your life every single day?
So I actually had this conversation with my husband last night, because it is perceived as a very easy job. And it's not. Like, I do love it. And that's the thing, is it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I love it, but it takes so much effort. And I think you can't be comfortable in this job if you're not genuinely happy to be in the community. And I really am. And I get so excited that I drain myself completely. Like, it's crazy. Like, all of my energy, like, I have a lot of energy and I get really excited being in the community and like helping people learn. So it's like from workshops to conferences, I like get this huge energy boost, and then I need to rest for like 5 days straight. It's ridiculous. But it's also like, when we make blog posts, like it's pretty thorough research that we do to be able to explain something and walk people through in the correct standards, and making sure that your code is up to date, and just doing a lot to make sure you're delivering the best that you can, the best content that you can. And then when you, like, I just started doing videos, as I said, and in the videos, that also takes a lot of energy, and in a way to like not bore people. So explain something that's pretty deep and technical and not bore people. So I will say, I really love everything that I do, and it is really great. But there are times, like I think it was like Paige Bailey I was talking to, said that she travels like 90% of her time. And somebody else on this call, Tracy, I think it is, travels a whole bunch. And you're not even Devrel. But I mean, we travel a ton too. Like, I travel out every week this week. So it can be very draining. It can be very exhausting. And sometimes it can be a little heartbreaking when things don't go as well in your community as you would hope. You feel really attached to it. And so as much as of myself and emotion that goes into my communities, it's like that much can also like hurt with the community as well. But it's worth it.
Yeah, I'd actually like to kind of plus one that. It's having things not go well is really draining. I've gotten, for Node.js and for my company, there's been several bouts of people just smashing the technology. That's not a fun part of it, and most people don't see that part of it. And that's part of the job, is going and managing that. And then like you said, it's a lot of travel, and that can be draining on relationships as well. This month I'm closing my last week. This is my only week at home. And then next week I'm going out to San Francisco. But that's kind of difficult a little bit. So yeah, I think that's another kind of downside, is it's hard to continue to manage relationships and make sure they're healthy.
I'll add to that the fact that that was one of the things I've learned, right? You get so excited. It's like, oh, I'm going to go to Seattle, and I'm going to go to San Francisco, and I'm going to go to Atlanta. while we were in Atlanta, I spent 2 days without getting out of the hotel. Like literally, I only popped my hand out to check the temperature, and that was it. So even though we are traveling a lot, it's basically not traveling in the sense that you are doing touristy stuff. Maybe, yeah, we get to go for dinners with our friends and our communities, and we go out for drinks, but you rarely get the chance to actually enjoy the place that you are in. And I think that's one of the, not the misconceptions that I had. Like initially I was, oh my God, I'm gonna know the world. And I think another, it takes a long time to travel. So that's the other thing. Like in London, because all the airports are so far away, it just takes me, I think, at least 3 hours to get out of the city. And that's just time that you don't get to, even though I listen to podcasts or audiobooks, it's not productive time, right? And if you schedule a lot of trips, I feel like sometimes I might not get enough productive time to actually produce the demos that I enjoy, or get to experiment with technologies that I'm really curious about, and all of that. And another point that I had was, so just like Tara, I started doing the community thing and conference speaking as a passion while I was working as a software engineer. And I find it really hard now to kind of balance the work and life. It's like I'm working, I feel like 24 hours out of 24 hours, it's just having fun and working for the community. And it's hard to put a stop to that. It's hard to say, okay, so this is my job. It's maybe 7 p.m. or 5 p.m., whatever. I should just go out with my friends and have a drink.
Yeah, a huge, definite agreement to that. That's one of the hardest things for me. And like even taking personal time, like there's always more you can and want to be doing in your community. And especially with, the community being a global community, there's always going to be someone pinging you at, 9 p.m. or 7 a.m. It's like, I have a hard time saying no. My manager calls me habitually helpful, to a fault. So it's like you never want to stop helping, but you have to start setting boundaries. And I have a really hard time with that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Simona.
Just one last thing there. I kind of became addicted to social media. So Twitter is my thing now. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's certainly happening.
Yep.
I think so. That's one thing that I'm realizing. So the boundaries thing, I've been doing developer advocacy for a year now, and it's taken me a while to realize setting boundaries as far as how many things of content you commit to, how many conferences that you commit to, because you will run yourself ragged because you want to be giving so much. And yeah, especially I'm on Twitter, and making sure the mentions of KendoUI or whatever happening on my feed or whatever. But I'm actually another Tierney's point about relationships and travel. I used to try to get a day of seeing the place I was at, and now I'm just okay, conference is over, I go home. I go back home. And I'm traveling this week to actually leave for Mexico tomorrow for an actual vacation. And it's I just can't, I'm still coming to terms with the feeling of leaving on a plane without my laptop. So we'll see how that goes.
You always have your phone. Yeah, it's interesting because even though I'm not officially a developer relations or developer advocacy person, I feel like I'm doing Devrel in general for the JavaScript community, right? I'm learning new things, talking about new things, trying to teach people new things. So that's always been an interesting thing. And I definitely think the relationship thing, all of us are in relationships. And I remember, just like you, Simona, thinking like, oh, this is going to be great. Travel's going to be awesome. And now I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm not that into it anymore. I mean, I'm into it. I love it. But like, I don't want to do it 3 weeks out of the month anymore, right? I kind of want to spend time with my boyfriend. And
You mean fiance?
Yes, fiance, exactly.
One of the things that me and my boyfriend have done is basically now Arthur speaks at conferences as well. So we're doing our best to speak at the same conferences. Oh, so at least we get some FaceTime while we're at conferences.
And that's actually something I've done with Rachel, my wife, as well. Is she came down to the first conference I spoke at in New York, Empire Node, Empire Conf now, but Empire Node then, and that's actually where we landed on our last name that we both changed to because someone helped us with it. But yeah, like that actually has been a pretty nice way to continue a relationship and have lower that barrier. It can be difficult when you're going across the country or across the world, but it is a nice way to be able to kind of go and still kind of engage during that time. She does make a joke that, well, I don't know if it's how much of a joke it is, but that I'm in my work mode versus in normal mode, and like I become kind of more focused on work and everything is about Node or community or JavaScript, and that can in that case be a little bit straining. So draining.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder how much of a trend this is of developer advocates trying to make their significant others become speakers. Because so my husband, like, he has a degree in architecture. He's a furniture maker. He runs his own business, but he also like does all his coding for everything that he does. So he's gotten into Vue a lot lately. So every time he learns something new, I'm like, you should give a talk on that. Like, trying to make him come out and give talks with me. Because I'm like, listen, we could go travel to this place and that. And this year, this was like my favorite part of last year. They let me go on like a user group tour in my camper with my dog and my husband from Sacramento to Seattle. So we would go and like meet up and like speak at different user groups, or I would. And then we would go into the mountains with the camper and the dog and just like hike around while I worked on a project and then go out. So yeah, there's like ways that you can meld the whole work and life thing, but yeah, we're still learning.
That sounds like a dream life though, Tara. Like really.
It was amazing. I highly recommend it to everybody.
Well, it depends on if you want to work with your spouse. I had one of those experiences and I was like, well, this is why the relationship died. What I found was that we kept, it's like, oh, well, I have to work on our our project. And so like you sacrifice, like that time you spent together is sacrificed through like, oh, we're working on something together. It's a little bit different if you're doing two separate things, but I know Stephen Fluin, for example, who does Angular developer relations, his wife, Stephanie, is starting to speak at conferences. So they get to go travel to conferences together. I tried to do it to my fiance too. And he's like, I was like, okay, I'm going to sign us up for a talk. Okay. He's like, so it's,
You just gotta have
maybe
all of his proposals all written out already. You can submit for him.
Yes, exactly. Or I was like,
I mean, his last proposal was very successful, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
He put very good. It was accepted to the Tracy Conf. And it's also funny because Simona, I can relate to the hotel thing you're talking about. Like everybody's like, oh, you get to go see things, but really one of my favorite things about going to conferences is the alone time and the like downtime I get in my hotel room. I'm sure all of y'all can feel that. Yes. I should actually just name my wedding Tracy Conf 2018. And thank you, Tierney, for that suggestion.
Yeah, no worries.
Yes. Well, I want our bridal shower to say like let's get committed, or we're getting committed, but he said that's too geeky, so It's okay. It's okay.
But you have a commit on your ring, right? Your first commit?
Yeah, and like I didn't realize until 24 hours later, I was like, oh my God, it's a commit because we're committed. Like, oh.
That's
like,
amazing.
Yeah, duh. I'm like, oh, I just thought you were being cute. Anyway.
That's awesome. So I know that I actually have a question for all of you. Because I have had a lot of people ask me like how to get prepared for a role like this. So like, basically like, what do we need to do to become a developer relations person? And I would like to know what everybody thinks is kind of the best way to prep yourself. Knowing everything you know about the career now, like what do you think are some of the best ways to prep yourself for it?
What's the name of the movie with George Clooney?
Groundhog Day? No,
the one with the one with him always being on a plane. I don't. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, watch that movie. That's the first thing. I think that the most important thing, which I have no idea how someone can prepare it, is just being passionate about community. I feel like all of us have started like this, just grinding away, being there and doing stuff like running meetups, writing content, writing demos, helping people, making sure that you have the right diversity at an event, or being passionate about contributing to the community. That's I feel like that's a must for everyone, and I don't know how you actually prepare for that. But then going further down the line, practicing writing content and creating videos and kind of going to conferences and speaking at conferences, I think those are the steps that are good to take before applying for this role.
I think there's a lot of unexpected things, and I think what Simona said is being passionate about community will generally get you over those humps. So it's definitely that's probably one of the most important things. And if you're not comfortable with that's a weird way to say that. If you have to always have compassion. That's one of the things I've learned is when someone is, going out and trolling your open source project, or going out and, being really hateful towards something, come at it with compassion. It'll usually turn around. But it's also compassion for the users that are succeeding. Hearing what their successes are, and then going and seeing how you can further help drive those successes. Just always kind of going and wanting to help people and wanting to help them grow rather than necessarily you grow. That's, I think, one of the most important things.
And I have to definitely plus one Tierney's like compassion and empathy, because one of the biggest things at this job is you are dealing with people a lot. And like in my life, I've always tried to be super empathetic, because it helps me understand the situation better, to try and understand where somebody's coming from. Like, how many times have you messed with software when you're like, it's just not working? And especially when something's like due, you tend, you're not always nice about it. So I feel like if you always approach people who are in that situation, remembering like, this can be stressful. This can, you can pour a lot of hours into a bug. And just remembering that we're all people and there's a human on the other side of this interaction, I think is very important. And also, one of the things that I realized helped me a lot was speaking at meetup groups. And meetup groups are always looking for speakers. As somebody who runs 2 user groups, we're always looking for speakers. And even people that do remote conferences, I don't know, Tracy, do you still do remote screenings of your meetups? Sorry.
Life is complicated and a lot of work.
Well,
Tracy, yes, the remote screenings are great.
Yeah, Tracy had this great idea of like bringing people in remotely to speak at conferences and see conferences. So there's opportunities there if you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere without a meetup to speak at. And on the same lines of that, two other things is to always submit to conferences, even if you're like, I've never done this before, this is super intimidating. It will always be a little bit intimidating. So just always do it and never care about if rejections happen. Like, it doesn't matter how many rejections, as long as you get to, you know, share your knowledge with the world at some point. And also, once you do speak on stage, make sure that you watch it. As cringy as it is to watch it, it's so helpful to watch yourself speak to help yourself get better. And I think that was a big hump I had to get over, like watching like through my fingers. But yeah, I think those are very important things, and reach out to your local meetups.
That's a really good piece of advice. Watch your talks. I do not watch my talks. I think we all just were like, okay, we're done. Let's move on to the next thing. I don't want to see myself in a Kool-Aid outfit.
I usually watch mine for about 10 seconds and then just close out of it because it's too painful. But I should, and my wife forces me to do it. So.
Oh, that's good. Good wife. I have one last question. I was like, okay, do we have time? We have time for one more. My question is, okay, as a developer relations person, you know, you're representing the brand. And so how, as a brand, do you deal with like, okay, this person is my brand? I mean, how do you separate a person and a brand when you guys are so closely tied to it?
I think that before we joined any of the companies that we work for, we already existed as individuals. So I think that's the first thing, like people would know me for being in the Angular community. How would you separate it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure even if we should separate it, like, because that's, I do feel like what I'm doing right now is I'm excited about it, I'm passionate about it, and I'm passionate about Azure. So I'm okay with being associated with Azure and Microsoft.
Yeah, I'd like to mirror that. I've actually seen a couple developer advocates move from one major company to another, and there's no real issue ever in them transitioning from, you know, speaking about this product to speaking about this product, or this company and to this company. It's really, I think it's a weird concept, but it's very much like open source. I think each of us has an open source project or kind of paradigm we're passionate about. I personally don't have any issue being kind of marked as a Node.js person, and because I care super deeply about it. And I think the same is true for NodeSource. Have no issue being a part of that or an image of that. And I think it might be a little bit more difficult for me than, well, maybe Tracy, but I control the NodeSource Twitter account the majority of the time. And so like that account basically is me. And so that it can be hard to separate like myself from that sometimes and that from myself. So, you know, it's difficult, but it's not, I've never really had a difficulty with it. Kind of weird concept.
Yeah, I don't know how tied I am, like how like the correlation of like me and KendoUI, but yeah, I guess I feel like we are pretty, we can chameleon. We can go where we see fit for the community, but and I think that sometimes we do wear a lot of hats too. So there are different like facets to what we reflect, but it's interesting to think of you know, like being tied to it like that and not thought of any other one. But so far, I think so good. I think we're our own individuals so far, but we'll see. Once I get that KendoUI tattoo, like we'll see. But
Well, very cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. You all are so amazing. I'm happy. The thing I love about the developer community in general is that y'all are my friends. So even as I was planning like my wedding, I was like, is it just gonna is it a conference? I mean, Tracy Conf isn't too far from the truth.
Can we just like remote in? Can you have a screen of all of our faces in the back of the room?
That would be amazing.
The biggest Google Hangout.
Exactly. I told my boyfriend, yeah, everybody can come set up booths. Like it'll be great.
You have
Fully
sponsors
justified.
for your wedding.
Yes.
Can you send me over the prospectus for that?
Yeah.
It's gonna be a huge turnout. You're gonna get a huge turnout.
Yeah. Well,
the
boyfriend is funny because he's like, I told him I wanted line dancing at the wedding. He's like, what's important to you? I said, okay, line dancing and a belly dancer and food. And he's like, okay, but what do you want the wedding to be? And I'm like, well, those are the two things I care about. So like, what are you talking about? I hope I get the line dancing. I don't know. We still haven't decided yet, but anyways, tune in next time for more things related to TracyConf 2018. Again, thank you everybody for joining. Y'all can follow these amazing people on Twitter. Simona is Simona_Cotin, Cotin. Tara is at TZManics, TZManics. And then Tierney is at Bit and Bang on Twitter. You can find more Modern Web podcasts at modern.web.com. That's moderndotweb.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Lady Leet. So feel free to, ask any questions to these amazing people. And we hope to see you on the next Modern Web.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.